Damien ruins horror movies. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Damien Ruins Horror Movies. I'm Damien, and tonight we are going to take a look at Halloween 2. If you don't already have this box set, Blu-ray, you should get it. It's the complete originals plus the Rob Zombie, and it does not have the 2018 because it came out before that. But one thing that's cool about this that I didn't mention last time was each movie's on its own disc, and each disc looks like the original. Like if you bought the Blu-rays individually, it looks like the disc that would come out of there. I'll show you. Look at that. It looks like you just bought the individual disc. It's not like because my Friday the 13th, it's 2 movies per disc, and it just looks like it was kind of slapped together. This one's actually really nice. And it's got 2 cases that hold 5 movies each. There's 10 movies total in here in the set. I think I paid $50 or $60 for it. It's worth it. And then you just have them. Halloween 2 takes place right after the original. Michael is gone. We even go back a few minutes to show the ending of the original because that was a very early 1980s thing to do. And now Michael is on the loose and he's wounded. Laurie is wounded. Laurie's been taken to the hospital. Loomis is still looking for Michael. And I gotta say, because I just finished watching it, I've seen it before, obviously, and not as good as I remember. Not good at all. I didn't really like it. I gotta say, I think I like the 2018 part 2. I think I like it better. And I know it kind of works as a choose your own adventure, because if you go the original and then you watch the 2018, that's like you're choosing a different reality, because the 2018 negates the rest of the sequels. There's just a 2-movie set, and apparently they are working on more to that alternate reality of it, where it's several years later. Or you can stick with the original. I guess, I don't know if it's cool. The Halloween universe is weird, because it starts where it starts and where we end up. You can stick with the original, where you have part 1, part 2, but then you got part 3 that has nothing to do with anything else, which I didn't like part 3 at first, and part 3's episode is going to be good because that's the most polarizing movie in this set, because people really do. People either love it or hate it. There's no like, oh, it's all right. People are like, I think even people that understand, because now people understand why that movie is the way it is. When Laurie gets to the hospital, it's kind of weird because like everybody knows her. Like Jimmy, one of the paramedics, is like, oh, that's Laurie Strode. She goes to school with my brother. And then one of the nurses in like a different scene is like, oh, this is Laurie Strode. And it's like, why do you guys all know her? It's the second movie. It's the same night. And then the doctor was out at the country club. He's probably drunk because he's been at the country club all night. So he shows up, and sure enough, he's drunk. And the movie doesn't make a big deal out of it. It's kind of, they just kind of gloss right over it. But it's funny because he's only in it for a second. He just kind of shows up and he like tries to give her a shot, and then not like a shot, but like a shot, and then he leaves. And we got Loomis hanging out with the sheriff. The sheriff has finally had it with Loomis. He's just like done, because Loomis is walking in there. It's kind of bad on 2 levels. One, because everybody's kind of looking at Loomis like, this is your fault, you let him go. Even though it's not really Loomis's fault. But in a sense, like, you doctors, you guys running that thing, it's your fault. So collectively, it's Loomis's fault. Personally, it's not. He got back and all the patients were escaping. So that's not really on him. He wasn't there when it happened. He was there after the fact. Shortly after the fact. The sheriff still blames him. And Loomis walks in like he's the sheriff. He's telling everybody what to do. He's been telling everybody what to do from the get-go since he appeared on the scene in the first movie. Which it's ballsy for a dude who's like, hey man, it's kind of your fault. Maybe you should like dial it back a little bit. I mean, if it wasn't for you, this whole thing wouldn't be happening. At least that's how the other people view it. And the sheriff is like, at this point, fed up. But this movie, it's kind of unnecessary. Especially from, I guess they only made it because the first one did so good. So like, we got to make a second one. And John Carpenter had the idea. He wanted to make an anthology where the first movie would be its own thing. The second movie would be its own thing. So this sequel, and this sequel kind of proves, because it's not necessary. Like, nothing really happens until the last 20 minutes. And not like it's a slow burner, but like, it's just like we just meet characters that die. There is a part where they think they see Michael Myers, and they're like, I think that's him. And Loomis is just running around with his gun out, pointing at people. It's like, hey, stop! You stop! It's like, dude, even if you're a cop, you can't do that. And then the person they think is Michael Myers, because he has a Michael Myers mask. Why does he have a Michael Myers mask? Spoiler alert. It's not Michael Myers. Michael Myers is still out there, and Michael Myers still has a Michael Myers mask. So how does this guy have it? It'd be different if he found the mask, like, this would be cool, and then was walking. But he doesn't. There's two masks. It's not a real... It's a William Shatner mask turned inside out. What are the odds that this guy's like, I'm going to turn my William Shatner mask inside out? But then he gets hit by a cop car, and smashed into a van, and then the van like kind of just bursts into flames, and so does he. And it turns out that guy they mentioned later in the movie is Ben Tramer, who was mentioned in the first movie. Ben Tramer's the guy that Annie's trying to set Laurie up with in the first movie. She's trying to hook them up to go to the homecoming dance the next night. But now, old Ben Tramer's dead. I never noticed that until today when I was watching it. So everybody's they're trying to diffuse the situation. They're trying to block off streets. They're trying to get everybody out of there. But meanwhile, all the locals that live in the area are protesting the Myers house, throwing rocks at it. And it's like they're telling the house to leave. And the poor house can't leave because it's a house. Meanwhile, Laurie's having these flashbacks. She's unconscious. She had a reaction to... It's funny because Jimmy says, like, I'm not going to let anything happen to you. And they're like, right... It's like, she's already had medication that she had a reaction to. Something already happened to her, Jimmy. Under your supervision. I mean, granted, he's just a paramedic. It's like, don't bother saying that because there's nothing you can do if something happens to her. She has these flashbacks of her mom saying, I'm not your real mother. And then she, like, visits a little boy. And then she wakes up. There's blood dripping. It's kind of a weird scene. Bud's the other paramedic. He's kind of this creep. He's the creepy guy. He would later go on to be, like, the ringleader of that group that raped Jodie Foster in the Accused. Yeah, he's that guy. And, yeah, he raped her on a pinball table. And he seems like, I don't know, he's very rapey type cat. Like, you look at him, it's like, this guy looks like a rapist. And he comes across that way in this, too. And he gets Karen. Karen's, like, the hot nurse who, like, has, I don't know, they're like a thing behind the scenes. But he gets her to meet him in the hot tub. There's a hot tub in the hospital. In the physical therapy area. I don't know. Is that a real thing? And they get in the hot tub. And she's, like, complaining. This water's really hot. Can you go check the thermostat? He's like, what? It's supposed to be hot. It feels good. She's like, go. And he's like, all right. So he gets up. He goes to check on it. And then Michael Myers is in there. So she's got her back turned. She can't see what's going on. And he's such a creep that it's funny because it's in the background. It's through the window. So it's kind of like the window's fogged up. But you can make out the images. And you see Michael killing him. And it's actually pretty fucking hilarious because he's just like silently just like resisting. But he can't do anything. Then he dies. And she has no idea it's happening. She's just like, still hot. How long is this going to take? And then, so Michael takes the thermostat and like starts turning it up because it goes up and then like there's a red zone that says scalding. Is that normal? Do all hot tubs have that where it's like, how hot do you want it? How about scalding? And then he goes into the room and she never turns around to look at him, so she assumes that it's Bud. And she like takes his hand and like starts putting it in her mouth, and I'm just like, huh? It's like, is she gonna notice that hand doesn't feel like it just came out of a hot tub 3 minutes ago? It's a dirty hand that's probably got blood and shit on it because he's been shot 6 times. But she doesn't notice until, well, she finally looks up and she sees it's not him. So then he starts waterboarding her. And the water's getting hotter and hotter. He's like dunking her. It's not burning his hand at all because he's like supernatural. And he's holding her under until finally, like, her face is just deep fried and boiled and she's dead. And then he goes on about his day. So Loomis does not want to leave until he gets the Michael situation taken care of. And a lady, I forget her last name, but her first name's Marion, Damn it, I wish it, because her last name started with a C. So I was like, that's very close to Marion Crane from Psycho. What is this tie-in we got? But her name's Marion. She's like one of the higher ups in the institute where he works, and she's saying, you need to leave now. You got to get it back. We're trying to keep this under wraps because this is going to be really bad publicity, and it's going to cost us a lot of money, and we're going to be fucked if this gets out. So you need to just, we don't want to be tied to this at all. You got to go. He's like, I'm not leaving until we get Michael. There's a marshal outside waiting for you. You don't have a choice. You have to go. Jimmy finds a dead nurse who's like had all the blood sucked out of her through IVs and tubes, where the tubes just led to the floor, and he slips in the blood. It's kind of funny. He like turns. Somehow he gets a huge puddle of blood, and he walks in there and doesn't notice that he's standing in blood. Like, I understand if you don't know it's blood, but you can tell when you walk in. You can tell if you're walking in liquid. So he's like checking on her, like she's dead, and then he's like, "Well, I'm gonna get out of here," and he just slips in it and falls and smacks his head and knocks himself out. Which is kind of gross because he's just laying. Like now his back is covered in blood. It looked like blood came out of his mouth, like falling on his back somehow made him bleed out of his mouth. So while Loomis is getting escorted, he starts talking with Marion, and she starts talking about a secret file, which Loomis thinks, well, that's weird because I watched this kid for 15 years. There should have been no secret files. And she said, well, this file it's secret because the Strodes didn't want anybody to know about it. The Myers had another kid, and then the Myers died. I don't know how the Myers, Michael's parents, I don't know how they died. It doesn't say. Somehow they died at the same time. So the Strodes adopted Lori. Lori is not their kid. And they just decided to stay in the same neighborhood. It's like, well, we adopted the neighbor's kid from 2 or 3 houses down. So Lori is Michael's sister. Wow, was that just a thing in the early 80s? Did it have like this big reveal where it's like, hey, it's like, didn't we just find out about Luke and Leia around this, like the year before? But at least Obi-Wan did a good job of hiding Luke and Leia from Darth. Nobody hid Lori at all. Michael comes back, finds her right away. So that kind of makes sense. And I heard John Carpenter just pulled that out of his ass during this movie. That was not a plan based on the first movie when he goes after Lori. It's random that he picks her relentlessly. It has nothing to do. They were not supposed to be brother and sister. For some reason, he was just going after her. But it makes kind of more sense that he knows about his sister, and he knows that she's there. It doesn't. I don't understand how Michael knows half the shit that he knows. Like, he found her house. He knows what classroom she's in. He knows. In this one, he knows what hospital she's in. He actually doesn't know what hospital room she's in. So that's something. So Loomis has his gun still, and he's like, we need to go back to the hospital because he's definitely going after Lori now. So he shoots out a window. He's like, this is a warning shot. He shoots out the window, makes the cop take him back, and they go in. And they don't know that Lori has escaped because Lori has had her run-in with Michael already. So she's escaped, and she hides in a car. And so they're on their way there. Jimmy wakes up. It turns out that's Jimmy's car. Whoa, what a coincidence. And Jimmy gets in, and he sees Lori hiding down there, and I don't know what's wrong with Jimmy, because he's acting drugged. It's like, okay, you knocked yourself out, you're awake. I don't know, he just seemed a little too groggy. And he's like, hey. And then he smacks his head down. And once again, Mr. I won't let anything happen to you, smacks his head down, head lands on the horn, so the horn's like, letting Michael know exactly where to go. Which doesn't necessarily mean that she's in there, but it's a good... There's people in there, so that's where Michael's going to head. And so Loomis and the others show up. They pass Lori. She's crawling. At this point, old Scream Queen's lost her voice. She's so weak from being stabbed in the first movie. So they pass her and they get inside and don't even notice her. And then once the door shuts, she's like, hey! She gets her voice back. But it's too late. And Michael's out there. And so she makes it to the door, and they happen to notice her, so they let her in. And then Michael just, walks through the glass, which is kind of funny looking. So Loomis starts shooting him. Shoots him several times. Eventually, Michael drops. Loomis tells Marion to run out to the car and call the police. The marshal's like, oh, only I can use my CB. And he's like, shut the fuck up. And the guy starts getting close to Michael. Loomis like, don't get close to him. He's not dead. He's still breathing. And finally the guy's like, look, I can see he stopped breathing. And Michael cuts his throat. So Laurie and Loomis bail. And they go up to a room where there's a lot of oxygen tanks. And it's like, Loomis like, I'm out of bullets. Actually, he wasn't out of bullets. Because Laurie, he gave the gun to Laurie. So Laurie's got the gun. Laurie's smart enough, she starts shooting Michael in the head, which Loomis should have tried that one of the 12 times he shot him. Say, yeah, how about you? The body's not working. For all you know, he's got a fucking vest on. Try the head. Try it once. Just give it a shot. So Laurie does. She shoots him in the head a few times. And he's like, you can see like blood behind the mask going like into his eyes. So he's got his like little scalpel and he's just blindly, and he's like making these weird bitch sounds like I swear he was. It sounded like this weird noise. I mean, because and it wasn't just a because there was a but over the you could hear. And he goes, how do you go from like going toward one corner where you think somebody is to going to the completely opposite side, and because now he's swinging at Loomis, and Laurie doesn't even move. She's just like, I'm going to stay in this corner, even though he's nowhere near me now, and instead of escaping. But Loomis starts turning on all the oxygen, so she does too, and Loomis is like, get out of here, and that is why the Badass Award goes to Loomis. Not just because he persistently followed Michael and wouldn't stop until Michael was dead, but now he has martyred himself to kill Michael and save Laurie. He blows up the room, and Laurie is now safe. And John Carpenter is now safe because he's killed off Michael. He doesn't have to make any more sequels. But wait! Who comes walking out on fire? It's Michael Myers on fire. It's like, what are you doing, John? You were off the hook. You didn't have to make any more movies. You can do whatever you want after this. And you kept him alive, and he collapses, and I don't really know what happens to him after that, because she gets out, and then everybody, I don't know, there's the big wrap-up, and the movie ends. What did we learn? Survival tips. Don't fool around with jackasses. I'm talking to you, Karen. I know it's too late. And don't go into hot tubs if you notice the thermostat goes up to scalding. Don't make any sudden movements if you're standing in a pool of blood. Come back next week, and I will see you then. Next week's going to be fun, because it's Halloween 3 with Tom motherfucking Atkins. See you then.